practically lied to us from the start. First, by acting as if this was for legal reasons. Second, by pretending he was listening to us right up to his art deletion.
Swirl the two dry powders together and then with clean wet hands squeeze them into a ball.
The other nominations include Best Picture, Director, Cinematography, Costume Design, Film Editing, Original Score, Production Design, Sound Editing, Sound Mixing, and Original Screenplay. The 802.11n standard operates on both the 2.4 GHz and 5.0 GHz frequencies.
The city is in stark contrast to the rest of the country's cities because it is more of an Arabic flair than of an African.
A curry is a dish based on herbs and spices, together with either meat or vegetables. These are sometimes crowded family beaches with a good range of shops lining the shore. Swimming is safe.
The Haitian Institute for Justice and Democracy has referenced independent studies that suggest that the Nepalese UN peacekeeping battalion unknowingly brought the disease to Haiti.
It is related to, but usually not involving alpine style ski touring or mountaineering, the latter ones done in steep terrain and requiring much stiffer skis and boots.
Ancient cultures and tribes began to keep them for easy access to milk, hair, meat, and skins.
In some areas, boiling water for a minute is enough, in others, several minutes are needed.
If you're not used to driving on country roads, keep your wits about you. Steep grades, narrow lanes, and sharp curves predominate. While this is often only an inaccurate stereotype, the best way to get along in Paris still is to be on your best behavior, acting like someone who is bien élevé, well brought up. It will make getting about considerably easier.
Finland is a great boating destination. The land of a thousand lakes has thousands of islands too, in the lakes and in the coastal archipelagos.
People may not anticipate that patience and understanding are also necessary for travelers returning home.
People now write messages on computer screens, never having to come close to a sharpener.
Still, take advice from authorities, obey all signs, and pay close attention to safety warnings.
While one experimental vaccine appears to able to reduce Ebola mortality, up until now no drugs have been clearly demonstrated suitable for treating existing infection.
Severe weather is a generic term for any dangerous weather phenomenon with the potential to cause damage, serious social disrupt, or loss of human life.
Perry stated that he would return to Texas to assess the results of tonight's caucus, determine whether there is a path forward for myself in this race. The letter said that he would remain in the race and compete in the January 21 South Carolina primary. The official Falklands currency is the Falkland pound, FKP, whose value is set equivalent to that of a British pound, GBP.
Their thermal behavior is not as steady as large caves on Earth that often maintain a fairly constant temperature, but is consistent with these being deep holes in the ground, said Glenn Cushing of the United States Geological Survey astrogeology team and of Northern Arizona University, located in Flagstaff, Arizona.
The presence of the true invisible team, Larson and LaFasto, 1989, page 109, is also a unique component of a virtual team.
Casablanca is one of the least interesting places to shop in all of Morocco.
Ottawa is Canada's charming bilingual capital and features an array of art galleries and museums that showcase Canada's past and present.
Other subjects on the agenda in Bali include saving the world's remaining forests and sharing technologies to help developing nations growing in less polluting ways.
I would very much like to see a very substantial debate on how Europe intends to take advantage of our unique educational system so that we remain united in our diversity.
I appreciate very much what you said, but can you make sure, once you foresee this kind of simulation 2 days, that you invite some of the people which were actually in Mumbai? I think it could give you some insight.
Okay.
That gives us a unique tool in peacemaking. €3 billion to counteract the negative effects of the economic crisis. That is to say, accelerate the implementation of the funds for the benefit of the real economy.
In these hard times of the economic crisis, we should respect the interest of the producers as well, and I am sure that this report balances the interest of the consumers and the industry. It is very important to involve the small and medium sized enterprises in the eco-label process, and therefore the cost of the authorisation cannot be too high.
I, together with a delegation of 4 members of this House, visited Camp Ashraf in October last year and met with American, Iraqi and UN officials there. They all reinforced our concern for the legal status of Ashraf's residents because the security was transferred from American troops to Iraqi forces from the beginning of this year.
However, this practice, which is not included in Parliament's rules of procedure, was introduced for the sole purpose of ensuring that the overall position on the budget adopted by Parliament would remain within the financial limits set for the European Parliament. In fact, the 2 amendments are in no way mutually exclusive and can therefore definitely both be voted. Therefore, I urge you, President, to apply Rule 161 of the Rules of Procedure and allow also a vote on Amendment.
So we better have a plan B next time. And last but not least, how can we win in diversity if our slogan is, unity?
and we better unite next time, and that is one voice. We need a univocal mandate.
The Copenhagen summit was a disappointment in many respects. The EU failed, especially in demonstrating a unified and efficient approach to climate change treatment, as well as in strengthening its leading political position in this agenda. I consider, therefore, taking this resolution an act of utmost importance.
I think we have to have a lesson to continue to face the long-term challenge of the post-oil age by diversifying our resources and technologies. We have to go and ask for the solidarity for the sector within the sector, because we have seen that no sector player could solve the problem, and we have to seek for solidarity within Europe, because BP is a European company.
In most EU member states we have legislation about NGO funding and its transparency, as well as funding of political parties. All we politicians would be very astonished if some fellow European member states' governments start funding our national NGOs for political campaigns. At least we would like to know the source of the money and the possible motives. We are sending the message that a society can have a healthy economy only when its members are able to contribute fully to its development. A healthy economy is the basis for a good level of employment and social policies, and vice versa. Good level of employment and social policies are preconditions for a healthy economy. This is the proof that fiscal stability leads to growth and employment. We need to respect the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact. It is essential to achieve growth and jobs, and to prevent that the debt burden is put on our children and future generations.
It is outrageous to see a government in Romania using the police and the secret service to intimidate political opponents, restrict civil liberties and falsify elections.
Increase the opportunities not only for the members of the European Union but in the region as well.
Firstly, it is essential for the European Union to strengthen both political and economic ties with the country. The existing cooperation in the fields of energy, education and others is a good start for further cooperation. Secondly, the European Union should use the enhanced PCA as a platform to promote improvement of relations between Kazakhstan and other countries of the Central Asia region. Furthermore, it is crucial that the PCA contains provisions for inter regional cooperation in the Central Asia region.
There is no time for Ukraine to lose. There is no time for the European Union to lose. They need an association agreement as soon as possible, at the beginning of next year.
And a few years ago, through a landmark agreement entered into force in 2009, all the 5 republics of Central Asia banished nuclear weapons from their territories.
It allows the mutual recognition of protection measures which are based on civil law rather than criminal law. I would like to ask my colleagues to support this proposal.
Let me state the main modification of the report.
The most important thing is to be balanced. We need a secure and cyberspace with rules and a degree of control, but we need also to protect its openness and the free flow of information and communication. Some Member States understand cybersecurity only as a prosecutor of hackers, and it is much more than that. It is a regulation of an ever changing environment.
Mr President, I want to focus on two specific areas of this very broad ranging report on organised crime in the EU. Firstly, I have long advocated that the proceeds of confiscated criminal assets should be reinvested into the communities which have been devastated by organised and serious crime. The social use of seized criminal assets for youth support, regeneration projects or even crime prevention could really help empower these communities. Almost 900,000 people are trafficked in the EU each year for labour and for sexual exploitation. Some stark examples have emerged this week of children being possibly traded and even abused. The discovery of a distressed teenager in Dublin this week is a reminder that Ireland is affected very much by human trafficking. I would ask the Commission to consider proposals for an EU-wide helpline in relation to victims of trafficking.
The principle of free movement does not include supporting or rejecting. So it depends on where the demand for labour lies.
It has the potential to become a milestone in our relations with the Eastern Partnership countries. Ukraine has been an honest member of the WTO since 2008 and will be an honest partner of the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement. But maybe more important for the European Union is that this economic integration will hopefully lead to political integration. So thank you very much, Commissioner, for your efforts, for the work you have done.
Madam President, the electronic link between the amendments to the budget did not work in the system when we prepared the vote.
147. Number 1238, concerning the establishment plan for the ACER agency, the total for AD posts should read 73 instead of 74, making a grand total therefore of 96. Number 1063, concerning a new line on the actual and desired state of the economic potential in regions outside the Greek capital Athens. This amendment refers to a new preparatory action and not a pilot project. Then there were two amendments adopted within the incorrect MFF headings, so they should be changed as follows. On Amendment 1153 preparatory action e platform for neighbourhood should be included in heading 1A and not heading 3. Then there are two amendments on existing pilot projects that must be withdrawn and replaced with amendments to create new preparatory action lines. Finally, to avoid duplication, technical corrections will need to be made to modify the budget line references of a number of new lines, mainly pilot projects and preparatory actions, proposed in our amendments.
At the present time, there is no proper free movement between Spain and Gibraltar, which I have the honour to represent. And this has been going on for months. Is it not clear to you that until proper free movement between Spain and Gibraltar is reinstated by your government, any concept of the EU having weight on the international stage, to use your own phrase, is a complete impossibility?
It is a threat to biodiversity, and it will force more and more people to flee their homes because of rising sea levels. I think the scientific reports become more urgent, more alarming and more shocking. And so does the rhetoric of world leaders when appropriate and when attending climate change conferences. If serious about climate change, the COP19 conference should speed up their commitments on meaningful and binding targets for CO2 reduction.
And I know it's very much a challenge, but I would like the European Parliament to lead on this very topic and not to follow. We have seen that all the developments on the internet are taking a very high and very rapid flight. The impact of the definition of specialised services is going to be enormous. And I very much fear that the definition in either of compromises is not very clear, and the impact.
The United States of Europe will be a fact, with Sweden as a providence. %. There are very large disparities between the youth employment rates in different regions.
So this is our goal. So how can we act?
And high representatives of government also participated at the event.
I am, however, worried that the winter package proposed by the Commission is a missed opportunity if we want to unleash the full potential of the green transition. If we do not act now, we will not only fail in meeting our climate obligations, we will also miss out on reaping the rewards of being leaders of green innovation. We need to create a climate that attracts scientists all over the world who want to come here and create breakthrough technologies. We need to support the shift through new products and clean tech startups.
We have sanctions. They should be continued, but it is also possible, if Russia goes on this way, that we increase these sanctions and have more smart sanctions against Russia. Russia is not only active in Ukraine, as we know, but also in Georgia. It is active in a cyber way in the Baltic states, so this is the Russian policy.
and waste regulation is a crucial part of that.
They are interested in democracy, but in e-environment.
In the year 2015, 157 members of this House signed, but after 3 months this oral question lapsed. Now I started this initiative again in January this year, and 246 members signed, but this oral question will again lapse if we don't put it on this week's agenda.
We need to think ahead, especially for the next MFF. This represents a lot less than what we are spending as European institutions on IT and digital services.
It should not replace existing technical assistance programmes that we have under operational programmes. And at the end, we should use country-specific recommendations to encourage member states, but not to punish them.
The day was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly 2012 and honours parents throughout the world. The Global Day provides an opportunity to appreciate all parents in all parts of the world. So I think for their selfless commitment to children and their lifelong sacrifice towards nurturing this relationship.
The world agreed to save its one and only home, doing justice to its traditional name, gifts from God. The Marshall Islands took action, becoming one of the first to ratify the Paris Agreement. The testimony of President Heine is a reminder of the need for action. We are disappointed and we regret that decision, but the abandonment of Paris by the US administration will not mean the end of the agreement. I am convinced that it will make the rest of the world more united and determined to work towards the full implementation of the Paris Agreement. Climate action does not need more distractions. We have spent 20 years negotiating. Now is the time for action. Now is the time for implementation. I see a strengthened resolve from all those who care about the future of the planet and who see the opportunities of a modern economy. We are also reaching out to our partners in the African Union and the ACP countries. The decision of the US to go back on its pledge to the Green Climate Fund leaves a major void. We need to keep the same spirit, more than ever.
Here, our Prime Minister standing, youngest Prime Minister in Europe, and bringing here a bold programme connected with digitalisation, digital revolution really in Europe. It is not only market, it is not only technology. In the first place, it is new relationships in the whole society, new type of services, new type of well-being, new type of engagement and activity and participation of people. And for that, I suppose it's very important also to build trust. And as a presidency, I suppose that's the most difficult task, because we can tell whatever about our good experiences about digital and so on, but you have to convince the other 27 or 26 that it is that. And very often you will listen to what we have heard here. Oh, you are so small and bold, you can do that. But we are much bigger. We have bigger risks.
Older people, people carrying strollers. We also insist on including built environment related to the provision of goods and services.
That same Geneva Convention states very clearly that illegal entry can never be held against refugees. This type of language undermines respect for the elementary rights of refugees. And the Commission is making no progress whatsoever with the ratification by the EU of the European Convention on Human Rights, nor on the European Social Charter. If we want dignity and stability, we need to invest in respect for human rights also by our companies, instead of in arms and defence. We all saw the tragic pictures of the attack in Las Vegas. It's cynical that after such an attack, arms sales in the USA go up, so-called for self-defence. This is a vicious circle. The more arms people buy, or states buy, the more attacks. Let us learn from this. Instead of speaking about more defence, let's stick to the European tradition of promoting human rights, also through radical disarmament treaties.
In addition to this, a new concern rises in regard to the proposed Press and Printing Act of 2017, which includes further controversial restrictions to online publication and provisions for the lengthier suspension of newspapers and journalists. This is why we will support this resolution, by which we urge the Sudanese government to stop its heinous practices against journalists and editors, in order to start to build a democratic environment where both the rule of law and human rights are respected. Unfortunately, this is just an aspect of a more complex picture that includes several violations of human rights, ranging from the well-known situation in Darfur to international criminal law concerns.
Ironing damp clothes can help them dry. Many hotels have an iron and ironing board available for loan, even if one is not present in the room.
So it is absolutely a very bad policy for our long term interests, and not only morally problematic to be on the side of this religious dictatorship. And without any doubt, the position of my Republican friends is consequently against the regime.
Taoiseach, I must start by thanking you for your continued efforts and commitment to preserve the peace process and to prevent the formation of barriers within the island of Ireland on foot of the UK's decision to withdraw from the Union. However, I do not share your ideology in other ways, so I must also follow that with a plea to you as Taoiseach of Ireland and as a member of the European political force whose worldview and power has most considerably shaped both the emergence of the financial and economic crisis a decade ago and the measures taken in That plea is that you work to mend the frayed social contract that can bind together our communities at national and European level. Just as the conflict in the north of Ireland hid inequality and deprivation of basic rights under a cloak of ethno-religious hatred, so today the march of disillusioned citizens draws much energy from the losers of globalisation and the losers of our response to a crisis of globalisation. We saved finance and strived for a return to the status quo ante in a transfer of wealth without precedent, and I agree with MEP Kofod's view of our corporate taxation regime. Fair taxation, even a modicum of taxation in some cases, might just help us to do what I've already suggested and, who knows, make the case for the retrospective bank recapitalisation that we never saw.
My remark to Brexit: I don't believe in this expensive and hazardous exercise.
I think it's unacceptable, and it's, as has been said, a sign of general regression for women's rights. But I must say that I'm appalled by the homophobia that I have heard. They attack all of us.
What would be crucial is to add the cost of not acting and not regulating. We have to listen. And there has been a lot of discussion about the LGBTI rights.
Could you name one other single country which gets macro financial assistance, is fighting corruption and has created independent institutions as a national anti corruption office and is preparing an own high anti corruption court? And could you please also tell me what in London you are supporting as measures in the city against the international money laundering systems?
And that young people are ready to do that and that we enable them to do it and to develop their capacities, it's a very good European attitude.
I'll let everybody speak a little bit longer. If you don't mind, I don't open this procedure up because we are running late.
Bardzo proszę.
Mr. Chair, this House should know that my group, the ECR group, was blocked from signing this joint text because of the childish political games of the Socialists, Greens and the GUE. Despite having worked together to try and agree on a resolution that would condemn violence by both communist or Nazi extremists, those groups were more concerned with childish political games than having a statement that this Parliament ensures free speech but does not tolerate.
It's important to have the debate and the vote this week, as the Commission is expected to adopt their adequacy decision with Japan at the end of this year, latest early 2019. Therefore, in order to feed into the process, Parliament needs to adopt its resolution beforehand.
We have long experience of the British establishment. We know that they don't care about Ireland, north or south. We know that they renege on their commitments. They have continually reinterpreted, misinterpreted and ignored the Good Friday Agreement to suit their own domestic political agenda.
Now you are learning what we have known all along. They cannot be trusted. The British legislation is not only a breach of the withdrawal agreement, it is a full frontal assault on all aspects of our Good Friday Agreement. So again, we look to you all in Europe to help protect our agreement, our peace process, and to help us escape from British misrule.
They know who they are. So
The sharing of our fundamental values and the respect for human rights must be an essential condition in our relations with third countries.
Therefore, Council Presidency, Commissioner, I urge you, get your acts together. Let's ban these programmes completely. Let's make Europe a better and safe place for ordinary people, not for criminals.
Regular announcements in the metro are made only in Catalan, but unplanned disruptions are announced by an automated system in a wide variety of languages, including Spanish, English, French, Arabic, and Japanese.
Although AI has a strong connotation of science fiction, AI forms a very important branch of computer science, dealing with behavior, learning, and intelligent adaptation in a machine.
This is not going to be goodbye. This is the closing of one chapter and the opening of a new one.
On the other hand, icy and snowy conditions are normal in many countries, and traffic goes on mostly uninterrupted all year round.
Blogging is a tool that inspires collaboration and encourages students to extend learning well beyond the traditional school day. Cuomo, 53, began his governorship earlier this year and signed a bill last month legalizing same-sex marriage.
If you have watched the movie National Treasure, you may think a treasure map was written on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
Generally speaking, two behaviors can emerge as managers begin to lead their former peers. One end of the spectrum is trying to remain one of the guys or gals.
Goats seem to have been first domesticated roughly 10,000 years ago in the Zagros Mountains of Iran.
Segregation and recombination shuffle variation back and forth between the two pools with each generation.
5 minutes into the display, a wind starts rolling in. About a minute later, the wind is reaching 70 kilometers per hour. Then the rain comes, but so hard and so large that it slaps your skin like a needle. Then hail fell from the sky, people panicking and screaming and running over each other.
Four skiers in the women's sitting group failed to finish their runs, and 45 of the 117 total skiers in the giant slalom failed to rank in the race. Women. It is recommended that any women travelers say they are married regardless of actual marital status.
Finally, there are many small cats, including loose pet cats, that eat the far more numerous small prey like insects, rodents, lizards, and birds.
Genesis EPC, earlier launched worldwide for cost-saving functionality factors, became a hot topic in 2007 Taipei IT Month. Appropriate use of blogs can empower students to become more analytical and critical. Through actively responding to internet materials, students can define their positions in the context of other writings, as well as outline their own perspectives on particular issues. Orvec, 2002.
Be careful not to allow fabric to become too hot, which can cause shrinkage or, in extreme cases, scorch.
First, most riders were riding boots with the heel on a smooth, quite narrow sole. 20th century research has shown that there are two pools of genetic variation, hidden and expressed. It is related to, but usually not involving, alpine-style ski touring or mountaineering, the latter ones done in steep terrain and requiring much stiffer skis and boots. Aristotle, a philosopher, theorized that everything is made up of a mixture of one or more of four elements. They were earth, water, air, and fire.
The commission was Martelli's response to widespread anti-regime protests that started in October.
According to Japan's nuclear agency, radioactive caesium and iodine has been identified at the plant.
Some people thought he was right, but many people believed the opposite, that the solar system moved around the Earth, including the Sun and even other stars. The surface of the moon is made of rocks and dust. The outer layer of the moon is called the crust.
First among its 78 recommendations is that a new diplomatic initiative should be taken before the end of this year to secure Iraq's borders against hostile interventions and to re-establish diplomatic relations with its neighbors.
The Moroccan Sultan rebuilt the city as Daru Ibadia, and it was given the name Casablanca by Spanish traders who establishing trading bases there.
One of the most common methods used to illustrate the importance of socialization is to draw upon the few unfortunate cases of children who were, through neglect, misfortune, or willful abuse, not socialized by adults while they were growing up.
The city is in stark contrast to the rest of the country's cities because it has more of an Arabic flair than of an African.
On some routes, the larger companies have their own planes, but for other routes and smaller firms, there was a problem.
Sharing a field trip virtually is also a great way to reflect on a trip and share experiences with future classes.
Towards the end of the Middle Ages, Western Europe began to develop their own style. One of the biggest developments of that time, as a result of the Crusades, people began to use buttons to fasten their clothes.
Most of the buildings on the edge of the complex have been rebuilt in order to give tourists a better idea of how they originally appeared.
As a result, the process of an organization working together to overcome an obstacle can lead to a new innovative process to serve the customer's need.
population is around 800. It is the smallest independent country in the world, and the population Most modern research telescopes are enormous facilities in remote areas with favorable atmospheric conditions.
Everything in the universe is made of matter. All matter is made of tiny particles called atoms.
The find also grants insight into the evolution of feathers in birds.
The moisture on your hands will react with the outer layers, which will feel funny and form a sort of shell.
Only mutations in germline cells can be passed on to children, while mutations elsewhere can cause cell death or cancer. The governor's office said 19 of the injured were police officers.
In its early days, the show was featured solely at the long-running internet radio site TogiNet Radio, a site focused on talk radio. The Giza Plateau, or Giza Necropolis, in the Egyptian Valley of the Dead contains several pyramids, of which the Great Pyramid is the largest, several tombs, several temples, and the Great Sphinx.
These couples may choose to make an adoption plan for their baby. USA Gymnastics and the USOC have the same goal, making the sport of gymnastics and others as safe as possible for athletes to follow their dreams in a safe, positive, and empowered environment.
MS is a disease that affects the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain, the spinal cord, and the optic nerve.
Sharing a field trip virtually is also a great way to reflect on a trip and share experiences with future classes.
Everyone participates in society and uses transportation systems. Almost everyone complains about transportation systems.
Muhammad was deeply interested in matters beyond this mundane life. He used to frequent a cave that became known as Hira on the mountain of Nur, light, for contemplation.
On some routes, the larger companies have their own planes, but for other routes and smaller firms, there was a problem. The parade of buildings that make the Hong Kong skyline has been likened to a glittering bar chart that is made apparent by the presence of the waters of Victoria Harbour.
The aspect ratio of this format, dividing by 12 to obtain the simplest whole number ratio, is therefore said to be 3 to 2.
The age where the events took place is commonly referred as the High Middle Ages, the period of European history in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries, AD 100 or 1000 to 1300.
It states that the most effective place for the main subject is at the intersection of lines dividing the image into thirds vertically and horizontally. See example.
It
which provides entry to either selections of parks in South Africa or all of the South African national parks.
The same month saw another airliner overrun a runway at Mashhad and strike a wall, killing 17.
The find also grants insight into the evolution of feathers in birds.
Mosasaurus was the apex predator of its time, so it feared nothing except other mosasaurs.
6 hostages, including the children and elderly, were released early, as were the Filipino photographers.
Beyond Wednesday's event, Carpenedo competed in 2 individual races at the championships. Plants make oxygen, which humans breathe, and they take in carbon dioxide, which humans exhale, that is, breathe out.
Other subjects on the agenda in Bali include saving the world's remaining forests and sharing technologies to help developing nations grow in less polluting ways. The correlation between brain pathology and behavior supports scientists in their research.
The announcement was made after Trump had a phone conversation with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Similarly, by having a Schengen visa, you do not need to apply for visas to each of the Schengen member countries separately, hence saving time, money, and paperwork. Italian is also the everyday language used by most of those who work in the state, while Latin is often used in religious ceremonies. Unfortunately, studying traffic flow is difficult because driver behavior cannot be predicted with 100% certainty.
Romanticism had a large element of cultural determinism drawn from writers such as Goethe, Fichte, and Schlegel.
A well-rounded athlete, the tiger can climb, though not well, swim, leap great distances, and pull with 5 times the force of a strong human. If you want to be close to the action, you're going to have to get in early to get a camping site close to the music.
Congress began funding the Obscenity Initiative in fiscal 2005 and specified that the FBI must devote 10 agents to adult pornography.
It has brought us the train, the car, and many other transportation devices.
With 2 years of the end of the war, the former Allies were now enemies and the Cold War began.
The U.S. Corps of Engineers estimated that 6 inches of rainfall could breach the previously damaged levees.
We don't know for sure, but it may have had a forked tongue. Its diet included turtles, large fish, other mosasaurs, and it may even have been a cannibal.
system the FAA claims would allow aircraft to fly shorter routes and save millions of gallons of fuel each year and cut carbon emissions.
Europe is a continent that is relatively small, but with many independent countries. Under normal circumstances, traveling through multiple countries would mean having to go through visa applications and passport control multiple times.
California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger signed into law a bill that bans the sale or rental of violent video games to minors.
Television reports show white smoke coming from the plant. Elements like calcium and potassium are considered metals. Of course, there are also metals like silver and gold. Scotport Bus 403 travels regularly to Sintra, stopping at Cabo de Roca. Most modern research telescopes are enormous facilities in remote areas with favorable atmospheric conditions. Also, between each dynasty was an unstable age of divided provinces. The best known of these periods was the Three Kingdoms epoch, taking place for 60 years between the Han and the Jin dynasty.
Greenland was settled sparsely. In the Norse sagas, they say that Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for murder, and when traveling further west, found Greenland and named it Greenland.
The term bug is used by entomologists in a formal sense for this group of insects. There are still many men and women alive who survived their time here, and many more who had loved ones who were murdered or worked to death there, Jews and non-Jews alike.
The city is also the base to climb the Nyiragongo volcano, along with some of the cheapest mountain gorilla trafficking in Africa.
Do not deface the site by marking or scratching graffiti into structures.
But after losing the captain's wicket, India only made 36 runs, losing 7 wickets to end the innings. Between 10 to 11 p.m. Mountain Time, a fire was started by the inmates in the yard.
So, it is likely that the notation was added simply as a label.
They have feet with scales and claws, they lay eggs, and they walk on their 2 back legs like a T-Rex.
He added they should not, however, be asked to take on obligations that go beyond their development stage, responsibility, and capabilities. The photographers later took the place of an aged lady as she needed the lavatory. Mendoza was gunned down. In just 2 weeks, the Americans and Free French forces had liberated southern France and were turning towards Germany. Plants make their food from the sun by photosynthesis. They also provide shade.
after the outbreak of hostilities, Britain initiated a naval blockade of Germany. Built by the Egyptians in the 3rd century BCE, the Great Pyramid is one of the many large pyramid structures built to honor dead pharaoh.
Mass car ownership also leads to a higher incidence of accidents on the roads, which leads to the invention of new techniques in healthcare for repairing damaged bodies.
Giancarlo Fisichella lost control of his car and ended the race very soon after the start.
Children are placed in foster care for a wide variety of reasons that range from neglect to abuse and even to extortion.
A central authority of the Church had been in Rome for over 1,000 years, and this concentration of power and money led many to question whether this tenet was being met.
According to Japan's nuclear agency, radioactive calcium and iodine has been identified at the plant.
Everyone participates in society and uses transportation systems. Almost everyone complains about transportation systems.
Most of the smaller islands are independent nations or associated with France and known as luxury beach resorts.
These theories look at what it is about certain people that make them want the things that they do, and what things in their environment will make them do or not do certain things.
The tiger's roar is not like the full-force roar of a lion, but more like a sentence of a snarly shouted words.
Blogging is a tool that inspires collaboration and encourages students to extend learning well beyond the traditional school day.
Prides are made up of 1 to 3 related adult males, along with as many as 30 females and cubs.
Police Superintendent Chandra Shekhar Solanki said the accused appeared in court with covered faces. The Great Pyramid at Giza is one of the 7 wonders that is still standing today.
Popular sports include football, basketball, volleyball, water polo, fencing, rugby, cycling, ice hockey, roller hockey, and F1 motor racing.
During this period of European history, the Catholic Church, which had become rich and powerful, came under scrutiny.
Through the night, between 150 and 200 copies were made, now known as Bunlap broadsides.
Cross ties were introduced fairly early to hold the tracks in place. Gradually, however, it was realized that tracks would be more efficient if they had a stip of iron on the top. But after losing the captain's wicket, India only made 36 runs, losing 7 wickets to end the innings.
The central authority of the Church has been in Rome for over 1,000 years, and this concentration of power and money led to many to question whether this tenet was being met.
Buses depart the inter-district bus station across the river throughout the day, though most, especially those heading to the east and Jakar Butang, leave between 6:30 and 7:30.
two compounds react with one another to form crystals that may block kidney function, researchers at the university said.
A simple popular dinner, especially during the summer, is pa'am oli, bread with olive oil, tomato, and any available condiments such as cheese, tuna fish, etc.
Resting on the top of one of the mountains north of Mecca, the cave is closely isolated from the rest of the world.
The archipelago lies 120 kilometers north of the peninsula. The largest is King George Island, with the settlement of Villa Las Estrellas.
Bishkek was described as sinking into a state of anarchy by one observer as gangs of people roamed the streets and plundered stores of consumer goods.
The vehicle itself was taken away from the scene of the accident at approximately 1200 GMT on the same day.
U.S. Gymnastics and the USOC have the same goal, making the sport of gymnastics and others as safe as possible for athletes to follow their dreams in a safe, positive, and empowered environment.
Plants make their food from the sun by photosynthesis. They also provide shade. This sediment was necessary for creating sidebars and beaches, which served as wildlife habitats.
Professor Pamela Ferguson of the University of Dundee notes, journalists do seem to be walking a dangerous line if publishing photos, etc., of suspects.
There are still many men and women alive who survived their time here, and many more who had loved ones who were murdered or worked to death to their Jews or non-Jews alike.
The number of people present was so large that it was not possible for everybody to gain access to the funeral in St. Peter's Square.
However, due to the slow communication channels, styles in the West could lag behind by 25 to 30 years. Everything in the universe is made of matter. All matter is made of tiny particles called atoms.
Rip currents are the returning flow from waves breaking off the beach, often at a reef, or similar.
It is thinner under the Maria and thicker under the highlands.
Soon after the outbreak of hostilities, Britain initiated a naval blockade of Germany.
Barcelona's official languages are Catalan and Spanish. About half prefer to speak Catalan, a vast majority understands it, and virtually everyone knows Spanish.
Australia's Mitchell Gorley finished 11th in the men's standing Super G. Czech competitor Oldrich Delenik finished 16th in the men's sitting Super G.
You can use Boda Boda motorcycle taxi to get around Goma. The normal local price is 500 Congolese francs for the short ride.
After the dam was built in 1963, the seasonal floods that would spread sediment throughout the river were halted.
Parisians have a reputation for being egocentric, rude, and arrogant.
Their disciplined defense, ball handling skills, and excellent teamwork made them stand out, and it was clear that this was the team to beat.
The 10th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, subtropical storm Jerry, formed in the Atlantic Ocean today. If you only go ashore using shipboard excursions, you will not need a separate visa as of 2009.
Layton had asked for changes to the Conservatives' environmental bill during the meeting with the PM, asking for a thorough and complete rewriting of the Conservatives' Party environmental bill.
Liberal criticism of the reconstruction effort has focused on the awarding of reconstruction contracts to perceived Washington insiders.
The most readily accessible plant resources would have been the proteins accessible in leaves and legumes, but these are hard for primates like us to digest unless they are cooked.
The 25 Dunlap broadsides still known to exist are the oldest surviving copies of the document. The original handwritten copy has not survived.
Finally, there are many small cats, including loose pet cats, that eat the far more numerous small prey like insects, rodents, lizards, and birds.
Current Senator and Argentine First Lady Cristina Fernández de Kirchner announced her presidential candidacy yesterday evening in La Plata, a city 50 kilometers 31 miles away from Buenos Aires.
These are sometimes crowded family beaches with a good range of shops lining the shore. Swimming is safe.
In the archipelagos and lakes, you do not necessarily need a yacht.
No tsunami warning has been issued, and according to the Jakarta Geophysics Agency, no tsunami warning will be issued because the quake did not meet the magnitude 6.5 requirement.
The Schengen zone, however, works somewhat like one country in this respect. Sleep interruption is the process of purposely awaking during your normal sleep period and falling asleep a short time later, 10 to 60 minutes.
Today, the only insects that cannot fold back their wings are dragonflies and mayflies. Accepted were Aristotle's views on all matters of science, including physiology.
For the Springboks, it ended a 5-match losing streak.
The hospital has followed protocol for infection control, including separating the patient from others to prevent possible infection of others.
The vehicle itself was taken away from the scene of the accident at approximately 1200 GMT on the same day. firm in turning down men, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Cultural differences or not, it doesn't make it okay.
The use of video recording has led to important discoveries in the interpretation of micro-expressions, facial movements, which last a few milliseconds.
However, these plans were rendered obsolete nearly overnight when over 80,000 soldiers from the Soviet Union Red Army entered and created the Belarusian and Ukrainian fronts after invading the eastern regions of Poland in violation of the Riga Peace Treaty, the Soviet-Polish Non-Aggression Pact, and other international treaties, both bilateral and multilateral.
Cancellation policies vary, but as of late March, most coronavirus-based cancellation policies don't extend to July 2020 when the Olympics have been scheduled. This will allow players to control actions and movements in video games by moving the device through the air.
A full 20% of the water that pours out of the planet's rivers into the oceans comes from the Amazon.
He was also engaged in engraving banknotes for many countries. Recent examples of his work including the Prime Ministerial portraits on the front of the new Canadian $5 and $100 bills.
Middle-order batsmen Sachin Tendulkar and Rahul Dravid performed well and made a 100-run partnership.
The disease is carried by pigs, which then migrates to humans through mosquitoes.
During the 1920s, the prevailing attitudes of most citizens and nations was that of pacifism and isolation.
There are, of course, Christian theological explanations for this tradition, but it may be a pre-Christian spring and fertility ritual.
Entertainment news website TMZ understands the photographer stopped his vehicle on the other side of Sepulveda Boulevard and attempted to take pictures that the police stopped before crossing the road and continuing, prompting the California Highway Patrol police officer conducting the traffic stop to order him back across twice.
The Three Kingdoms was one of the bloodiest eras in ancient China's history. Thousands of people died fighting to sit in the highest seat in the Grand Palace at Xi'an. The most readily accessible plant resources would have been the proteins accessible in leaves and legumes, but these are hard for primates like us to digest unless they are cooked.
The composition of these crystals matches those found in the urine of affected plants when compared by infrared spectroscopy.
Hoon has resigned and he will be replaced in the cabinet by Ed Davey MP. Norman Lamb MP is expected to take the business ministry job Davey is vacating.
He was greeted by Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister Wong Kan Sang and discussed trade and terrorism issues with the Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong.
Duval, who is married with 2 adult children, did not leave a big impression on Miller, to whom the story was related.
It's renowned for being an epicenter of luxury, began in about 400 AD and lasted up until about 1100 AD. Remember that even though music on the main stages may have finished, there may be sections of the festival that will keep playing music until late into the night.
Most interpretations of technological determinism share two general ideas: that the development of technology itself follows a path largely beyond cultural or political influence, and that technology in turn has effects on society that are inherent rather than socially conditioned.
More traditional churches often hold an Easter vigil on Saturday night during the Easter weekend, with the congregations often breaking into celebration at the stroke of midnight to celebrate Christ's resurrection.
He referred to the rumors as political chatter and silliness.
The archipelago lies 120 kilometers north of Peninsula. The largest is King George Island with the settlement of Villa Las Estrellas. Popular sports include football, basketball, volleyball, water polo, fencing, rugby, cycling, ice hockey, roller hockey, and F1 motor racing. Current Senator and Argentine First Lady Cristina Fernández de Kirchner announced her presidential candidacy yesterday evening in La Plata, a city 50 kilometers, 31 miles away from Buenos Aires.
The scenes are displayed on the pyramids, and the different pyramids are lit up.
California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger signed into law a bill that bans the sale or rental of violent video games to minors.
Professor Pamela Ferguson of the University of Dundee notes journalists do seem to be walking a dangerous line if publishing photos, etc., of suspects.
He has been unable to take the drugs needed to overcome his pain as they are banned from the games.
For example, the most common still image photography format in the world is 35mm, which was the dominant film size at the close of the analog film era.
Also to the north, visit the great sanctuary of Our Lady of Fatima Shrine, a place of worldwide famous Marian apparitions. Aerosmith have canceled their remaining concerts on their tour.
Hong Kong Island gives the territory of Hong Kong its name and is a place that many tourists regard as the main focus. Feral children may have experienced severe child abuse or trauma before being abandoned or running away. The debate was sparked by controversy over spending on relief and reconstruction in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, which some fiscal conservatives have humorously labeled Bush's New Orleans deal.
The scientists were able to conclude that dark matter affect other dark matter in the same way regular matter does.
Entertainment news website TMZ understands the photographer stopped his vehicle on the other side of Sepulveda Boulevard and attempted to take pictures of the police stop before crossing the road and continuing, prompting the California Highway Patrol police officer conducting the traffic stop to order him back across twice.
Muhammad was deeply interested in matters beyond this mundane life. He used to frequent a cave that became known as Hira on the mountain of Nur, light for contemplation.